show coming to the Memorial Auditorium. Enter every day at local3news.com.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit of spring cleaning this morning when it comes to your finances. Not so much in getting rid of them, but just in cleaning them up and making them easy to find. Kevin Fuerst is here. He's with Fuerst Financial Group, and on his mind this morning is estate planning, which I think, Kevin, a lot of people, I would include me in this camp, when I first think about estate planning, I think about building the estate. Your kind of focus this morning is on making the estate accessible, if you will, for people, because it can get really, really complicated.
I say it gets messy, but complicated is probably a better word, but there's so many different moving parts, especially as we age and our children start to step in and help us, or we need help. You're used to doing things a certain way, and then other people have different ideas. We were talking earlier about the auto pay versus having it, actually write checks. I mean, it just gets, and when you're taking over someone else's estate planning or getting them ready for that process, it's just messy.
So, okay, I'm a completely open book, so I'll open up that book. This is providential that Kevin's here this morning because I talk about my mom all the time. She's 93 years old. The last 2 days' conversations have been involving money. My oldest brother is her power of attorney, so he's kind of handling all this. But he recently went through the loss of his father-in-law. Kind of a complicated estate, but it was very, very difficult. So now he's trying to prevent that with my mom.
Right, and I think when people go through, it's what happened to me. When you go through an incident like that and you have a loved one pass away, it's not the passing away, it's all the stuff you have to do, the bank accounts, the personal property, the real property, but even before that, just getting ready for that. And that's what estate planning is. You're really getting your estate in order. You're doing the spring cleaning we're talking about, making sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that when you pass away, or if you become incapacitated, you have the documents in place that you need. You're aware of where all the bills are, what needs to be paid, because you're taking on a whole new household. So you've got your own stuff, and then you're trying to manage someone else's stuff, and sometimes they pay too much, they don't pay enough, they get late charges, they start
or just their methodology is different. That's what's happened. My brother's a pilot, my mom is a definite not pilot, and so what makes sense to her does not make sense to him, and he's had to try to step in and be accommodating for what comforts her. But something else that I have found is that the older we get, the more difficult change is. So, I mean, hopefully most of us are very vibrant in our 70s and 80s, but is that a good time to kind of begin making some of these plans before the change is too difficult to accept?
Yeah, sooner than later. That's what I say. I mean, if you have a good estate plan in place, and not just an estate plan, because estate planning is part of the wealth management, your assets, your debts, your taxes, your insurance, and then the wills, the powers of attorney, all the things that go along with that, set them on one course so that as you do age, you have things kind of on autopilot so that if somebody has to step in, it's not a burden to them, which is what I think what we want. It's what I want. As my wife and I get older, and my kids have to take over whenever that is. But that's also hard to accept as well. But there is that point that the kids start getting involved. The parents are slipping here and there and doing this wrong or doing that wrong, and you feel like you need to get involved. And it's also messy because you're really getting in their business that you normally don't want to.
Yeah, it's complicated for both parties.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And I would think it's challenging for you too, because if you've been with a client for a number of years, sometimes decades, you form a bond and you know what your client's financial philosophy is. And it's not always building money. Sometimes it's just having what you need.
Correct.
So then kids come in and they might be on a different focus.
Sure.
That's got to be a challenge for you.
It is, and I think you just have to sit down with people, and it's just hard to do, the sitting down with people. What I mean by that is the family or the people that are going to be involved with the succession, if you please, of the next generation. And from them being able to handle it to starting to turn it over to you, and you start to help them and then they become completely dependent on you, and so that's a whole different level. And then when they pass away, then comes the settlement. Did we have everything in place so that we can avoid any other additional costs?
Okay.
Probate court, attorney's fees, those kind of things. Have we got everything in order so that when it comes to settlement, that everything goes where the parents want it to go?
So this is not a topic I really know anything about. So I'm pretty ignorant in asking you these questions. So for people who might be like me, they haven't walked this yet. What's your starting point? If you're going to start spring cleaning and getting this planned, do you start with a financial advisor if you don't have one? Do you start with just kind of talking with your spouse, your parents, whatever?
Both. I think if you don't have an advisor, I think it's good to get an advisor. I think it's good to have an IA, it's an investment advisor. He has a fiduciary responsibility to do what's right for the client. I think you work in that with that type of person, and then you try to formulate the plan before you get there. I think that's what we like to do. It's better. I don't like jumping into a situation where the bombs are already going off and you're trying to put out fires. But I'll do that too. I mean, I have a different objective in that I want to make sure that everything's in good order.
Right.
And so I'm able to walk people through that process as much as I can. It's still messy. It's still there's a lot of moving parts. But you try to bring all that together, make sure beneficiaries are right, make sure that ownerships are right. Usually when one spouse passes away, nobody changes anything. They leave it all the same. Well, what if something was just in his name and you didn't change it and the husband passed away, and now you've got something that's titled wrong. Now where's it going to go when she passes, the second spouse? Assuming it's the mother that passed away.
And what does happen in that case? If something is in one spouse's name but not what happens to that asset?
You could go through probate court. You could even go through probate. We've had people have to go through probate court at the first death because it was in his name. That person doesn't have a right to really do anything with it, depending on what type of asset it is. Especially if it's real property or bank accounts. So we've had clients come in where the spouse passed away, the husband in this case that I'm thinking of, and he had a lot of property in his name, not in joint name. And so what happened is we had to probate it, and a third of it, because there were 2 boys, it's called dying intestate. So what happens in intestate is that equal shares go to the spouse and the living kids.
So what if you had, suppose you have an account, a bank account, that's in your name only, but you can still have that, you can still leave it in your will to your spouse.
Well, you can do actually bank accounts, you can do a thing that's called a POD, payable on death, so you can actually name a beneficiary. Now I like a trust over the will in some cases, most cases, at least that we deal with. So you can actually make the trust the beneficiary of that bank account. So the parent passes away, the second parent passes away, and who then gets the money in the bank account? Well, the trust does, because it's the beneficiary. And then the trust, there's a trustee, which would be your brother-in-law or whoever's helping. He's then the trustee, and then it follows the distribution out to the children.
Trust is a very key word.
Yes, it is.
You want to trust because you're going to trust that your money's going to be covered the right way. You got to trust the people you're talking to, and you got to trust your financial person.
You do.
I don't know if we even touched on half of what you wanted to talk about, but it is complicated.
It is, and messy, but get with somebody that can help walk you through that process, and it does make it easier. You get an objective viewpoint that's going to point you in that direction of settlement, because settlement is where we're all headed.
Like it or not.
Yep, and so we got to get ready for that. My father-in-law put it best: get your house in order or spring cleaning. That's what you really got to do.
All right. I like his website too, which is growkeepleave.com. His phone number 899-8555. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
We hit a ceiling or resistance, which led us to over an increase overall for the year. But with that,
those are crinkly.
Opening a bag of chips without making any noise is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan for your